Hello, everyone, and welcome to 10 Minutes to a Better Building. I'm your host today, Tyler Kern. Thank you so much for joining me here for this episode of the show. Today, we are talking about achieving elite Energy Star status, and we're going to be talking to a representative from Boland, but also one of their customers to get the other side of the story to learn a little bit more about what it's like to work with Boland on projects like this. So, joining me here on the podcast today, first is Jim Bauer. He's an account executive at Boland. Jim, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Absolutely. We are happy to have you here on the show with us. And we're also happy to be joined today by Gary Wine, the Deputy County Administrator and IT Director at Berkley County Council. Gary, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning. Thank you.
Well, I'm really excited to dive into this topic with both of you here today. I think this is going to be a lot of fun, just getting both sides of how this works and what this looks like. And so talking about achieving elite Energy Star status and what that means. So, Jim, what are the steps that you have to go through to achieve elite Energy Star status?
So in order to achieve it, you need to measure how you're performing. So as a HVAC company and energy services company, when we develop a relationship with a client, we want to be able to have access to their energy consumption, their bills, their energy data. And from that, we can help them start on getting their Energy Star rating, right? If we can measure how their building is currently performing, we can tell, we know whether or not there's room for improvement, right? So Lord Kelvin said to measure is to know. So to get that access to that data will put us on the path to trying to figure out where they currently are compared to like type buildings, like type use, like type geographical area, their peers. The second thing is once we have that data is to get the building connected. So we like to connect to that building through the building automation system because there's a plethora of information, more information than most people can imagine. By gathering that information, then we can monitor how that building is performing and start communicating with the client about scheduling and setbacks and how the building is waking up and going to sleep every day and making sure that is done properly while maintaining tenant comfort.
So, Gary, this is obviously a process that you went through and that you worked with Boland on. What was it like for you to work with Boland and to go through this process?
Sure. So I think it's important to know that everything we do, we're a government entity, so we have to answer to the tax dollar, to the taxpayers. And on a side note, we do everything based on data. You mentioned my title as the IT director. So I'm well involved with all of the information. So with Boland, they made it really easy. They came to us and said, we've identified, or we would like to help you identify some of these inefficiencies, some of these problem areas. And we've got this solution that can trap data, trap statistics, and help us speak to your problems from a numbers scenario. So having done that, Jim was the lead. They really held our hand, brought everything to the table, and we've made decisions from boilers to ice plants to chillers to everything and in between, all based on those insights. So I couldn't speak any more highly.
Jim, earlier you mentioned the importance of data, and that's obviously going to be something that's important to someone like Gary, who has the position that he has. So can you learn or can you explain the importance of having a connected building and what you're able to learn from that and what it can mean for decision makers like Gary to be able to have the data that comes from a connected building?
So when we connect the building, we're monitoring that building's performance 24/7, 365 days a year, right? Mm-hmm. We're porting that data to the cloud. Our energy engineers and the computers are scrubbing that data, looking for anomalies, looking for system drift. ASHRAE says that a building's performance will drop 30% in the first 3 years from when it's brand new. 30% drop in performance. All that is due to human error, scheduling, somebody overrides something, or things stop performing as they were designed. A cooling tower has a plugged fill, a chiller has foul tubes, a rooftop unit develops a leak of refrigerant, or coils get dirty, or a VAV box unit is not performing, the reheat's not coming on. So when we connect to a building, we can monitor the performance of that building with the energy data that we have, right? We know what it should consume, or we know what it currently is consuming. We can drill down to those anomalies or those pieces of equipment that are not performing properly because we know how it should perform, and we're comparing how it's performing to that knowledge. And then that creates actionable items that we discuss with the client and say, hey, if we change this, repaired this, fix this, adjusted that, we can make positive impacts in your energy bills. And that's what we do. We collect that data, develop a report, review it with the client, and then make changes to positively impact the energy bills. Sometimes you can go a little far. You can try to make the building too efficient and maybe affect, tenant comfort. So that's why we like to monitor and communicate with the client. How did this change impact the building? And he may say, well, we started the building too late in the morning and it wasn't up to occupied temperature or down to occupied temperature by the time people started rolling the building. So then we relax those energy conservation measures so that we're not impacting, the client.
Well, Gary, when I think about this and I think about the situation that you are all in, you're trying to be good stewards of taxpayer money, right? And you're trying to be responsible with what you've given. And so going through these steps and working with Boland is part of doing that, right? It's part of being good stewards of what you've been given by the taxpayers.
You nailed it, Tyler. I mean, the applied building insights that Boland offers and what they have done with some of the equipment replacement, we have seen in some instances as high as 47% energy reduction. So that's not to say that obviously we were doing the greatest before we started, but we're in 100-year-old buildings. And Jim, one of our buildings over 100 years old is what, 94? Is the energy rating?
94 Energy Star rating on a 0 to 100 scale.
Yeah. So we all know it. It's all about the data. This model, this level of service really helps you. And, we focus on numbers and statistics, and Jim said it, I think now 3 times I counted, you talk about tenant comfort. We had no tenant comfort. All we had were complaints about the building and the air was too fast or it was too cold or too hot. Since we deployed our latest change in a 75,000 square foot building, hand to goodness, we have had 0 tenant complaints.
Absolutely. I think that's really, really well put. And I imagine once you get into a situation where you aren't getting complaints, like you mentioned, you're able to look forward and be a little bit more proactive about what you want to do with these buildings to make them even better. Are there plans or thoughts to make any future updates to buildings?
So let me speak real quick to what he just said. With applied building insights and monitoring this building's performance and tenant comfort and energy bills and consumption, we're looking out the windshield, right? We're trying to be predictive, not reactive. We want to see things starting to happen so we can correct them early before they cost you too much money in increased energy spend or cost you pain and agony in decreased tenant comfort, right? So that's what this does. This lets us get ahead of the game and catch the problem before it becomes too big. In the process of doing that, and over, in Gary's case, in Berkeley County's case, a handful of years, 5, 6, 7 years or so, we've tested and tuned and commissioned this building over and over again and made what was currently on site as far as equipment goes the best it could be, with its technology and its vintage and so forth. So we reached a point where I thought we couldn't wring too much more out of it. And that started the discussion about end-of-life usefulness and the efficiency of the current equipment that they were using to create their hot water and create their chilled water or chilled glycol. So we went for a walk and we started looking at those pieces and parts and started looking for holes in the game, how they were. My strategy is always to look at how can I create their hot water and their chilled water as efficiently as possible. What is the best method to do that using the least amount of energy, right? I try to deploy that. Then I look at how can I utilize that hot water and cold water as efficiently as possible. So taking that strategy, we looked at his boilers. We looked at his chiller. We looked at his fan coil units and air handling units. And then I looked at how can I retrofit those units? How can I replace those units with something that is infinitely more efficient and is going to have a big impact on comfort and energy use? And that's what we did. We came up with a game plan and 2014 did some budget proposals and then gave those to Gary, discussed them, made sure he understood them, digested them, that he could then push those upward to the county council. And we started exercising those projects in 2018, Gary?
Yes, sir.
2018. We're not done yet. We have some more to do.
You know, Jim, one of the things that strikes me about this particular conversation is it echoes a lot of things that we've talked about on the podcast here on 10 Minutes to a Better Building before. It really brings up that attitude and that general principle that Boland abides by of viewing buildings holistically, right? Of taking a look at the entire building. And I think that's a really important thing just to talk about because it's something that is very intrinsic to who Boland is. It's taking a look at every aspect of a building and a holistic view of things.
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little bit there. The meter is on the building. The meter is not on the boiler. The meter is not on the chiller or the rooftop unit. So it's a system approach to go in there and say, Gary, you need a new chiller. Let's just put in a new chiller. Yeah, he needs it, but is like you said, is that what's best for the county's budget? Just put a new chiller in there. Let's take the opportunity to fall back a little bit and let's look at the system and see how we can use this opportunity of capital replacement to amend your system, change your system maybe and make it better than what it is. If we put in just components and not look at the whole system, I think we're leaving a lot on the table as far as energy conservation goes, reducing that carbon footprint, reducing that gas and electricity consumption. And what's great about Berkeley County and having Gary as a client is he understands and listens to what we're saying and discusses it. You know, we have communication back and forth, the what ifs. Well, if we do this, how will that affect this? And then he also educates himself on the side and is willing to go on a factory trip to St. Paul to the controls, our controls headquarters, and then drive a couple hours south to La Crosse and look at how chillers are manufactured and sit in on those discussions with those experts who are a lot smarter than I am. And we sit down and have a discussion about Berkeley County. And we picked up more things there that we added to these projects to make their buildings as good as they are currently and get those reductions of almost 50% on their energy bills.
You know, Gary, I hear what Jim just said, and it makes me wonder, like, how important it is to have relationships like what you have with Boland, where you can work together and trust one another and work together to find solutions. What is that like from your perspective?
So we all have to agree that education is paramount to success of anything, right? So one of the things that's really important in Boland's transparency is they'll take you to the source, they'll get you to the source, and get you the answers outside or under the covers, if you will, than what you may or may not have from a typical sales proposal. So we appreciate that. I'm not a decision maker. I answer to a body. So they present it to me, we discuss, we come up with a solution, then I in turn present it to a body that makes these decisions. So when you're talking about spending, $2, $3, $4 million, you really want to be confident you're making good decisions. So all in all, great experience. Appreciate everything that the team has done from the senior leadership clear down to the folks that come and service it afterwards. These things are living and breathing. These buildings are just like you and I, man. They take maintenance, they take care, and we're pretty happy with the outcome.
Well, we are going long on our time today here on 10 Minutes to a Better Building. But before we wrap up, I want to get final thoughts from each of you, just to give the listeners something to walk away with here after they watch this episode. So, Jim, let's start with you. Do you have any final thoughts or conclusions you want to leave our listeners with here today?
I think the most important pieces of this is information and communication, right? There's so much information in a building, in that building automation system, getting that information out, getting that energy bill data, getting the consumption, being able to have our smart folks back at our office, our energy engineers, crunch that data, and then being able to take that back as a client-facing employee of Boland and intelligently communicate that back to Gary to help him understand what's going on with his building so then he can make informed decisions on how to make it better. It's all about information. It's all about communication. It's all about connecting that building in applied building insights. It's very powerful. And if you don't use it, you're leaving a lot on the table. It makes you cover a lot more ground with a lot fewer people and to be a lot proactive out the windshield, right?
And Gary, I'll give you the final word here. Anything you want to leave our listeners with here at the end of this episode?
Jim said it real well a little bit ago. We're looking through the windshield, paying attention to what's going on. So the insights piece is incredible. Pay attention to the data, make your decisions based on the data, and have a relationship with people that can pull off the tasks at hand. Works great.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us here for this episode of 10 Minutes to a Better Building. It's been a pleasure having you along with us. Jim and Gary, thank you so much for being here.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Absolutely. And everyone, thank you for tuning into this episode of 10 Minutes to a Better Building. Like I mentioned before, there are a lot of episodes of the podcast, so make sure to go check out the previous episodes that we've recorded with topics ranging across all aspects of taking care of buildings and making them better. So you want to go check out those previous episodes and stay tuned. Subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date with the latest. We'll be back soon, very soon, with new episodes of the show. But until then, for my guests today, Gary and Jim, I've been your host, Tyler Kern. Thanks for joining us.